First of all, I would like to say welcome to our participant. We are very proud to see you here, and we will listen and then to see the Europe, Netherlands, and Southern Cyprus and England biologist union ECBA activities and associations, and respectively, and we will listen to the problems biologists which they have. Onur, söz sende.
Dear participants, welcome to the third session of the second day. The chairman of this section is İhsan Soytemiz. İhsan Soytemiz is the president of the Turkish Biology Association. Mr. Soytemiz, we are waiting your speech.
Okay. Thank you very much for your participation here. And now I would like to introduce the European Community Biologist Association, ECBA President, Mr. Harm Schmidt. Please, Mr. Harm Schmidt.
Yes. Thank you very much. Shall I share my presentation?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, there we go. Well, merhaba. Ben adım Harm Schmidt.
Welcome, Mr. Harm Schmidt. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Attila. But my Turkish is not so good, so I will proceed in English. So here is our little presentation on the common future of biologists and the role biologists can and should play in the world. First of all, something about the ECBA, European Countries Biologist Association. It's an association of associations, so we are sort of the umbrella organization for many biologist organizations throughout Europe. And our goal is, amongst others, to support the development of a sustainable society and to progress all aspects of biology to that society. So that is what we're trying to achieve. And we run, of course, in all kinds of problems. And one of the problems we have is about rights and obligations. I prefer to use rights and obligations because rights is what you should get from society. And the obligations are what you should give to society. And it is should, it is not will. So we have some bumps in the road. Not everything is going the way we would like it to go. So for that reason, we have to ponder a bit around to see what's going on. So first of all, what are our rights? We should have a proper education. I think biology is cornerstone for all people in a society to understand what the world is doing around them and understand what's going on. So we need proper education, if only to become a good biologist. The next thing what we need is possibilities for research, and that also entails money, which is also very important. Luckily, we see that the amount of money flowing into biological research is quite substantial. So there we have a good entrance. And the third one is respect, because if you are not respected, people will not listen to you. And that is one of the problems we have in biology. We have a lot of knowledge, but we are not always listened to. So that was what we should get and what we should give to society. I think that is very important, is economic prosperity. I will show later on that biology is a pivotal piece of our economic prosperity. And we are also able to sustain our future. So we can give information which helps us to understand how to keep our society running for the future years. And for biologists, because economic prosperity and sustainable future can be applied to anyone, to any field. But for biology, we use the words health, environment, and food. Those are three pivotal ideas where biologists have a great contribution. But there is a bump in the road. Many biologists do not have a clear idea about what a biologist is or what a biologist can do. And that simple fact is frustrating our rights and obligations. We cannot execute our rights and we cannot give back to society just because society does not always understand what biology can do for them. And here's an example. I use stock photos always about how society sees biologists. And here's one where they say stock photos of scientists reveal that science is mostly about staring and sometimes at chickens. So that's why there's a lot more of those, but I will save you those. And the other thing is, of course, that makes us feel a bit alone and left out by society. We have many things we can bring, but nobody's listening to us. So we are sadly sitting in the corner often and feeling pity for ourselves. And that is not a good thing. So what is it? What's the problem of biology? And I think it's a hidden success of biology. Because the question is, what makes biology and biologists so successful throughout the years and in many fields? You can't imagine in how many fields biologists play a role. Yet it is not recognized by government, by business, and the general public at large. People just don't see biologists standing there. So what is biology then? Let's first clarify that. So the biological sciences encompasses all the divisions of natural sciences, examining various aspects of vital processes. The concepts include anatomy, physiology, cell biology, biochemistry, and biophysics. And it covers all organisms, from microorganisms, from animals to plants. This is what nature says about biology. And of course, we should add, of course, that it also applies to all organizational levels, from molecules and atoms up to society and the planet as a whole. So that is what a biology is. So if someone asks you what the biologist is, this should be our answer, and that nature is the reference. But what's the problem? Is we have fools at the table. Many people show their characteristic self-awareness, security, which you only can have if you don't really understand what's going on. So our field is riddled with people who think they know about biology and the biological problems, yet they don't really understand it. There are many, we all have many examples of how that is. So that means we are still here. Now we know that we are not regarded in a proper way, but how do we solve that? We are still feeling left alone and not respected. I think that's very important. So, and that's what I learned from the Italian biologists. The Italians have many words for being proud to be a biologist. So I think that the only real solution we have is to get out of our self-pity corners, is actually to be proud on ourselves and what we do. That is the foremost, most important thing we can do and should do. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we can start by saying that biology is a rather ancient science. Commonly, we assume that the first biologist was Aristotle, who in the year 346 before Christ went to Lesbos due to a little mishap at the society in Athens, and there he started doing the first biology work. So that makes biology 2,368 years old as a science. I welcome any other science to come with such a precise point of starting and the age of biology. So we are a very old society. That's very important. The other thing is that we understand evolution. And in 1972 already, Theodosius Dobzhansky said, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of the evolution. And that's evolution is a subject which in itself is science, but it has a strong annotation in society, which we will have to fight and keep fighting, because if you don't understand evolution, you don't understand biology. And I know you are fighting for that case for years and will be fighting it just as we are here in the Netherlands. You're not alone there. And in my personal work, I find out that it's a medical field, I found out that many problems can only be solved and understood if you go back in time and figure out how these things have become. So this is a very important aspect of biology, which we have to keep stressing, because people keep mistaking science for wild ideas. So that's what we have to stand strong for. And then the second one is that I always use this example. Well, the other thing is the difference between biology and many other fields is I use a hammer, a rabbit and a brick as an example. And this is how we do research. You hit a brick with a hammer and then nothing happens. And then you hit it again with a hammer and you hit it harder. And at that point, the brick will break in two, as you can see here. And then we have learned something from our experiment. We have learned that if you hit something hard, it will break in pieces. So then we switch subject and we move to the rabbit. So first we hit the rabbit and nothing happens. And then we're going to hit the rabbit again and harder, but then the rabbit has left. And that is one of the things that most other sciences are completely unaware about, is that our subjects, the biological subjects, the subjects of biological science, tend to respond to their environment, which means that it's never a linear abstraction you're looking at, never a linear process, but it's a complex process of organisms and systems responding to the environment, which makes it rather more complicated. And I see in real life that many other sciences have problem with exactly this aspect of biology, that we are dealing with non-linear processes, but very complex processes. And only a biologist is trained to understand and work with that concept. And then the third one, of course, is that we have our planets we have to take care of. Like any other thing, we always have a plan A and a plan B. Sadly, we have no planet B. So that is the other thing we have to fight for. And here again, and especially here, also biologists have the knowledge, but we should be heard. And that is why we should be very vocal about what's going on in nature and make people aware of the fact that if you fiddle around with the planet, you're fiddling around with your future. And even last week, there was an interview on the British television about someone from Greenpeace. And she was talking about we have to make large choices now. And the interviewer said, yes, but that's not going to help me when I have to drive to work tomorrow. And here you see the offset in the discussions, the problems in the discussions, that people are not trained to understand what their current decisions mean for the future. And that is also a place where biologists have to be very vocal. And then why is biology important? Because we have to have some proof as well. And here's an example which I use from the Dutch biologist organization, where we wrote a report on the economical impact of biology. So we say we have a central role in solving major issues. We have to drive the scientific process. Biology has to feed a growing world population, which is a rather difficult problem. We have to, because we have to do it in a sustainable way as well. We have to improve health for today's and future generations. My personal view is I wander around in the medical field, and I see when it gets very complicated, you need biologists because we have a very different mindset. And finally, biology has a central role in protecting the environment and protecting our biodiversity. So failing to solve these issues will propose a threat to our common future. So that is very important. And here you have again, feeding the world, improving health and protecting our sustainability. So those are the three aspects coming back. And in the Netherlands, we had a look at what actually is then, because if you want to talk to society, you have to talk money. So what is the impact biology has on our society? And it will be different for every country, but it will be more than most people understand. And And in the Netherlands, it's approximately 40% of our economic production will pivot around biological aspects. And somehow economic and policy makers found that out, and they call it the century of biology. And you can also see it because there's more money going to biology research. But we're not there yet. And they're still missing the fact that we have a lot of different problems still around. So here is a nice report from the US, which is very interesting because it also puts biology in its real place where people don't get it. So we have, and they've named it new biology, but I think it's just biology, but every now and then you need a new name to get attention. But it says what biologists do is that we integrate physical and chemical sciences, computer sciences, biology, engineering, science, education, and mathematics. We all put that together, and that gives us a deeper understanding of biological systems. And here again, the organizing principles where you once again see back the complexity of these systems. And that will bring out, and there again, we have the output, health, environment, energy, and food. But I have to say that the energy aspect is somewhat lost these days because we have perhaps better ways or more economic ways of producing energy than using algae or stuff like that. So that could be an emerging field. It could also be a dissolving field. We will see in the future. And one thing which is not here, but which is very clear in the paper, is that biology also means zoology, botany. Those are integrative, very important aspects of biology. So the sad news is, even for this new biology, we have to maintain all our, as you can say, old fields as well. So that is also very important. So now, what are our goals then? How do we proceed from here? Well, the first goal is to be self-aware. You have to know what you know, and you have to be proud to know what you know. And only if you're self-aware, people will start listening to you. And they won't come to you for questions. You will have to find your own space. You have to make your own space. And we do that by claiming your place in society. And we have to do that by developing a strong biological vision, a strong biological science or philosophy, and integrate that with other sciences. But we also have to do that in a way that society will understand it. So our biological mumbo jumbo, or all the difficult terms we use, we have to translate that into bits society can understand. And finally, we have to keep out self-proclaimed specialists who are lacking the relevant skills and knowledge to be able to, who are polluting our discussions. Because every now and then you're sitting at the table and there's someone who's very self-aware shouting out the most idiotic claims. And we see that popping up all over the world in all aspects, but biology is not immune to that, I would say, or perhaps even less immune than other sciences. So there we go. And there's something else. This is also nice for biology. If you want to be a proud biologist, this will help. This is a science report from a guy named Gurdon. It's from 1944. And it's about a guy who says, it says here, it has been a disastrous half year. His work has been far from satisfactory. And he goes on ranting about this person who is absolutely, he's not suited to do anything, and certainly not to be a biologist. He has no ideas, he has no science, he has nothing. So this is, so if you get a report like this, this should mean you should quit. But this guy didn't, and good for us, because this guy is Mr. Gurdon, and here he is, John Gurdon, 2012 Nobel Prize winner. So I think this is the other thing which biologists, if you want to be proud to be a biologist and you have someone questioning your science, you should just point them to the Nobel Prize list and say, look, guys, who is winning the Nobel Prizes here? Who is driving science? And I can tell you there's no other science which produces so many Nobel Prize winners. So that's why we have to be proud. And here's one of the pieces of the evidence. So that would be sort of like it. because I think the main thing for us, if you have to be, we can shout at society, we can complain about society, we feel that our knowledge is necessary for the future, but that does not mean that we can sit back and wait for society to come to us. We have been granted the knowledge. You have been taught to be a biologist. You have been granted the knowledge. Well, take that knowledge and take your responsibilities and live up to the expectations. And the only thing I can do is to be proud to be a biologist, and you should have to do it yourself because no one will do it for you. So I think that is the message I think I have for especially young biologists is be self-aware and move forward. So that leaves me to the end of my presentation. I can stop sharing. There we go. So I hope.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Han. Very nice presentation. And then can you please some words about the European Committee of Biologists Association, and then maybe someone not known, and then can you please explain about the European Committee Biologists Association?
Yes, well, the ECBA is founded in 1976 already, together with the forming of the Economic Union in Europe. So we are around for quite a long time. We have many member organizations, and we changed our name from European Communities to European Countries Organization because we feel that biology is not about politics, but it's about just the European field and people connecting to each other. So this is one of the reasons we changed our name, and now we are able to. It is a bit. The ECBA is a bit of an organization you can use for your own benefit and to transfer information throughout Europe. So that's what we do, and we are involved in all kinds of projects just to do that.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Han.
Right.
And do you have, I think we will get the questions at the end of our session.
Yes.
Now, I would like to introduce the Royal Society from the Royal Society of Biology, Professor Dr. David Coates. Please, David Coates.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation to talk. It's timely to follow Harm's conversation there because Harm's given this a very big view of the importance of biology and the importance of getting the message across. I'm going to share my screen now, but what I'm going to talk about is the use of accreditation as a driver for change, as a way of enhancing the standard of, in this particular case, higher education degrees. And I'll tell you a little bit about why we found that to be a serious issue in the United Kingdom. So the Royal Society of Biology was formed only about 12 years ago, 2009, as a result of an amalgamation of various previous organizations. So before that, there wasn't a single voice. There was lots of different voices in the country, and government got very mixed messages about biology. And that point that biology covers everything from the molecular right up to the population and right up to the ecological aspects means it's quite difficult to get messages across to politicians. So the Royal Society of Biology came together to advise UK government, but also to look at to advance education and professional development, to make sure that the graduates in particular of university programs are fit for purpose. So this is just a little bit about the background. There was an Institute of Biology, which was involved in the original foundation of the European countries' biological associations. It's a chartered body, which means in the UK that it has responsibility for standards of education, as well as professional standards of practicing biologists. There was another organization called the Biosciences Federation, which was essentially a collection of learned societies. And by bringing all of those together, we formed what was then the Society of Biology, which was later renamed as the Royal Society of Biology. So what I want to talk about is the drivers for accreditation. And I need to be clear here that accreditation in the UK is not necessarily the same as elsewhere. Accreditation is often used to mean approval of a program. And in many countries in Europe, that approval is carried out outside the university. It's carried out by external bodies. In the United Kingdom, that's not how it works. Universities are responsible for the programs they put together. And as long as they follow some basic rules, which I'll talk about in a bit, the standard they set is up to the university. So accreditation in the UK is about bringing in that external view, bringing in a professional view about what the minimum standards should be. Clearly, there are going to be barriers, champions, resources, and I'll tell you a little bit about where we've got to at the moment. The real driver for this is employers. So the UK has a very strong life sciences environment for research and for development. But about 15 years ago, a report came out that was published by the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industry, the professional body for British life science companies, that in very crude terms said that graduates from UK degrees were not worth hiring. They didn't know how to use their subject. And that was sort of the defining characteristic, that graduates from biology degrees knew a lot, but they didn't know how to use it. Too much knowledge without understanding how to use that knowledge is not really very useful. They identified issues right through the educational process. And the results of that contribute to this national gap in the provision of adequately prepared citizens from primary right through to higher education. And in particular, they were interested in biomedical research because that's what their business is. And they produced another report a couple of years later called Sustaining the Skills Pipeline, which itemized the problem with graduates from universities. They didn't have the technical skills to work in the laboratory. They didn't have very strong numeracy skills. They were not good at maths. And they didn't really understand the scientific method and scientific literature. And the graduates were really, in the UK, were not as competitive as they could be or should be. And at that stage, we were thinking very much about competition locally within Europe, where the different educational processes gives more mature students and a longer period of time to practice the learning, to use that knowledge. There are a series of barriers to this. We'd never done it before. And one of the reasons we'd never done accreditation for biology before, whereas for chemistry and engineering and clearly for medical and dental and all the health things, accreditation is been around for a long time. We've never done it before with biology because it's such a broad subject. And the question becomes, how do you define what a biologist has to be? Because that's going to be different if you're a molecular biologist, if you're a population biologist, if you're a whole organism biologist. So the subject is really very broad. And there was some serious concern over how much money this was going to cost, because especially in the UK, the growth in biology, the growth in students studying biology has been enormous over the past 30 years. And the resource hasn't necessarily kept up with that. So biology is seen as a cheap thing to teach. You can get large numbers of students through it, but the problem is there's not a great deal of resource left afterwards. The other issue is when we looked at other accreditation systems in the UK, a lot of them were very tick box approach. It was, you know, do you teach this, get a tick? Do you teach this, get a tick? Do you teach this? And there was a debate within the community about what the basic knowledge had to be. And that's exemplified by this phrase, of course, all students will need to learn about the protista, which was a sentence that came out of a meeting we had with a whole set of learned societies. Now, I have no doubt the protista are important. I used to do research in that area. But I really don't think every biologist working is going to need a detailed knowledge of the protista. What they need is a way of finding out and understanding the knowledge that's out there. And government, who were pushing for accreditation, wanted to see clear failures. This was a real bone of contention for us because we didn't want to set up a system that failed universities. What we wanted to do was to set up a system that helped universities achieve the standards that we collectively agreed were needed. But government was funding, so we had to think around that. There's an organisation called the Heads of University Biosciences. These are heads of departments across the UK who are very influential because they're the ones who are going to implement curriculum. They're the ones who are going to develop any change that's needed for programs as they were to move forward. And they were very much against any change. And the underlying reason for that was that, and this is not an uncommon academic view, is that universities believe they are best placed to know what to teach. And this is a failing within academics who have never worked outside universities. But the idea that they might have to change their curricula, change their programs to fit what employers needed, rather than what they wanted to teach, which focuses very much on research, was a problem. They were worried about having to teach specific things. They were worried that the field was far too broad, so that any accreditation we brought together would be very, very picky. And they felt that there had to be lots of different rules, again, because of the breadth of the subject. So we got round those problems in two ways. One is the government gave us a significant amount of funding to develop it, because government really wanted this to happen. We had to argue with the government, though, that we had to be the ones to define the accreditation, not politicians. So we had to get an agreement that it was the community that would own the accreditation, not the politicians and the external non-biologists. And we agreed that we would trial a smaller, more focused initial offering, but that if that worked, we'd expand it. And what we found in these conversations was a sort of typical political situation, that when you're presenting to a group of people, they were all against it because of the change. But when you talk to individuals, they're all in favor of it because it's going to help their student recruitment. And those are the two issues that have to be balanced in all of these things. As a bit of background about the way degrees are developed in the UK, we have, through the Quality Assurance Agency, which is the body that's responsible for quality in higher education in the UK, we have a series of benchmark statements. These are statements for each subject, which define the minimum standards required to be acceptable in higher education, but they're not legally enforceable. They're just minimum standards that you need to be looking at. many of these benchmark statements are really very specific about the knowledge that's needed, but the biology one was written very cleverly originally. It was created by the community 20 years ago. It doesn't specify knowledge. It doesn't say you have to know this, this, and this, but what it does give is examples across the range. 3 different areas: molecular, whole organism, and community and ecology. And it has been accepted as a good framework. So what we decided was to use that benchmark statement, but build in additional things that employers in particular, but biologists in general, felt were important additions to the benchmark. So where the benchmark was not compulsory, to get accreditation, you have to be doing these different things. And the reason for accreditation just summarizes here as recognizing academic excellence. Everybody wants to be seen as excellent, but really driving up the standards of learning and teaching in the life sciences. It was a pushback against the very strong research culture that had developed in the 90s to ensure the pipeline of graduates supports national excellence and give employers assurance that if they take students from these programs, they will have the skills that are needed. And we basically have 2 programs to do that. The first one we built, which was the experimental one to prove it could be done, was advanced accreditation. And that focuses very strongly on graduates who are going to go into research environments. And it does that by extending the program an extra year. So these are what we call integrated master's courses. It's an extra year. And the definition of that year is whatever knowledge you've learned in the first 3, you should be demonstrating its use in that 4th year in the English system. Once we'd set that up and shown that it worked and shown that there was a demand for it, we developed the broader accreditation that everybody wanted, which was the more general approach to standards within biology degrees. Loads of benefits. The obvious ones for students are about employability and enhanced competitiveness. For prospective students, it's actually more of a benefit to the parents who like to think that their children are going to take a degree that's been externally validated in some way. For employers, it's a clear signpost about the skills that these students can evidence. And for higher education institutes, for universities, it's about that recognition of quality and particularly enhanced recruitment opportunities. The underlying message, though, is that it's a driver for change, because if you want to get accreditation, you need to follow the general principles of that accreditation. And that, until recently, has always meant significant curriculum change. So we designed a process in 2012 for advanced accreditation and tried that out after consultation with learner societies and with universities. Then we followed that with another 6 months of consultation. We ran pilot programs. Universities volunteered to come forward so that we could refine it. And we launched the general accreditation in 2015. So it's been around for 7 years. And we believe it's a very different approach. It is about identifying excellent programs, and there are specific learning outcomes. I'll give you a view of those in a moment. It's about partnership between learner societies and employers, and it's about sharing good practice. One of the key differences for this approach is that it's a dialogue. We have a conversation with the university. It's not a monologue, single judgment. And that dialogue is helpful to everybody because it means you can share good practice, and it's one of the key outcomes. It's not about the wide recognition of threshold standards because that's what the benchmark does. And it doesn't make judgments about the type of degree you're developing. It makes judgments about the student learning outcomes at the end. And there are only 6 criteria, although there's quite a lot of detail underneath this. And the 6 criteria about a capstone experience, a project of some kind, because that's how you integrate all the knowledge that you've learned before. Competence in the practical environment, because that's what employers really need. Students have to know how to work in the laboratory or in the field. But as well as all of that, they have to have all the other skills, team working, leadership. They have to have a foundation in maths and physical sciences, because biology is an integrated science that integrates maths, physics, and chemistry. There is some subject-specific knowledge if you're doing a very particular degree, and we get information from the learned societies for that. And then finally, there's this line, creativity and enterprise. And this is the one that has driven the most change. This is about problem solving. This is about teaching students to solve problems in creative ways, because that's what they're going to do when they go out into the real world. They're going to be faced with problems and they have to find solutions. We go back to this failure thing. The minister in charge at the time wanted to see a clear failure. We had one clear failure, but they knew they were failing from the beginning. So it was a very nice political judgment. But actually, we don't really allow for failure, because universities get advice before they apply, and there is no public failure, because that's not good for anybody. What does happen, because it's a dialogue, is there's lots of conditions and recommendations. Conditions have to be done, recommendations are advice. We want to reduce reputational damage as much as possible. And an accreditation lasts for 5 years and then has to be done again. So it's about recognizing excellence and developing the skills that industry needs. It's not about judging the content necessarily, because we're not really specifying content. That's up to universities. And it benefits employers by providing work-ready graduates. And in 2019, Skills Development Scotland, which is responsible for skills planning in Scotland, which is where I'm based, was very clear that the students coming out of accredited universities were much more fit for purpose than they had been in the past. What I find really good about this is this sharing good practice. Because it's a dialogue, once a year we have a conference and we get the best examples from that year to give presentations, because teaching in higher education shouldn't be about making it up from the ground every single time. It should be about building on the experience of other people as well. How successful has it been? Well, in 10 years, we've moved from the 4 trial sites that we had in the UK to 80 different universities having some form of accreditation. There are about 120 universities in the UK that could be accredited. So that growth is enormous. But one of the other things we're very proud about is that this style of accreditation, there is demand internationally for that. And we now have a branch that does a form of international accreditation that is just about circling the globe as we build that up. Universities that want an external view, want advice, in particular in some countries, on how to develop a program, and want that recognition of international standards in biological sciences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, Mr. David.
Thank you, Mr. David. We well understand how important of the accreditation, and then you are giving also the accreditation to all over the world. Maybe one of the university would like to get the accreditation from you in Turkey. So is it possible?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you can, if you share my details afterwards, or I can send you details. We're willing to talk to anybody.
Yeah, okay. I have many creative idea about that. So some of the universities would like to be in a good position. So, and then also standardize their courses and lectures in the university and the laboratory situation. So it is very important. So if we well understand the accreditation systems, so we can create many good projects with you.
That would be very good.
Thank you very much indeed. So thank you very much. This is useful and for presentation. So it is very unknown in Turkey. So for the biology education, so it is very important now well understand the situation. Now I would like to introduce to a neighbor from Cyprus, Biological Society of Cyprus, Mr. Mikis Hajinoptou. Maybe I can correctly pronounce your surname, Mikis. Welcome.
Hello, how are you? You
Thank
have
you
pronounced it better than me.
Thank you very much.
So, may I share the screen as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm getting there. Right. So welcome to warm and sunny Nicosia. Many people have left Nicosia today and went towards the sea. It's a lovely day here. So,
Yes.
Sevgili dostlar, sevgili biyologlar, çok memnun oldum. And I will leave it here. I'll switch back to English. So,
Biz de çok memnun olduk Mr. Mikis.
say that again.
Biz de çok memnun olduk Mr. Mikis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about certain issues that we face here in Cyprus regarding graduates, university graduates of biology, and also some issues facing schools that teach biology in Cyprus. And I have a sneaky suspicion that possibly the problems we face in southern Cyprus also exist in North Cyprus. All right. So I am the secretary of the Cyprus Biological Society. It represents our society teachers of biology at all levels of secondary education, and of course, university lecturers and staff. We extend our greetings to the organizers of this important workshop, and we do hope that this will mean the start of a long and fruitful cooperation between our two organizations. We also extend greetings to all the participants. We note the presence of eminent scientists from abroad, and I would also like to salute my fellow Cypriot participant, Gizem Mulla, whom I have just seen among the participants, and I had the pleasure to meet just a couple of weeks ago in Nicosia. So who are we? It's our association, our society goes back a long way. It was formed in 1978. It is rather the oldest science establishment in Cyprus, and many distinguished and prominent members of social, scientific, and financial life of Cyprus have served the Cyprus Biological Society. There is no need for me to read the rest. We strive for the creation and support of professional contacts and information exchanges, including the organization of scientific meetings, workshops, seminars between biologists in Cyprus as well as biologists from abroad. Provision for assistance and support as well as rewards for Cypriot scientists, lecturers, students in Cyprus, and Cypriot biologists, of whom we have a lot that work and live abroad. Broadening of the interaction and networking between scientific events in Cyprus in all aspects of biology and their application in health, medicine, environment, as well as in industry. And of course, participation of CBS in economic and social aspects relating to biological sciences. We hold the CBS 6 different Olympiads for all ages across the age group from 12 to 18-year-olds. We participate in the International Biology Olympiad, the European Olympiad Experimental Science, and the International Junior Science Olympiad on a yearly basis. We also have several awards which we give to people who deserve them. But let me come to the main point, which is the focus of this workshop as I understand it. It is extremely difficult to find a job in Cyprus, work after completing studies. There are a number of reasons. Cyprus is a small country. Job opportunities are scarce. We have many overqualified scientists in biological sciences. Many students choose to study biology because they find our subject fascinating, and it is, of course, as we all know. There is a yearly large turnout of qualified biologists who seek a place in the market economy. The number of higher institutions, universities, for example, in Cyprus, probably are no more than 10. Some biologists work in clinical labs where pay is not so much, is not quite up to scratch. These people are on the constant look for more sustainable jobs. And teaching biology at the state school is a favorable option for the vast majority because it offers job security, stability, and a fairly good salary. So when their turn for employment at a public school turns up, they gratefully opt for the opportunity to teach, even people working in laboratories and institutes. However, none of them has the required qualifications for teaching. In the very near past, they were literally thrown into the deep end on appointment as teachers. The Cyprus Pedagogical Institute, AKADEMİ rather, and the University of Cyprus stepped in to provide help. Nowadays, all prospective biology teachers complete a yearly course at the university and the Cyprus Academic Pedagogical Society to prepare them to teach. This hasn't always been the case. There were times when a university graduate was just christened as a teacher and sent to the classroom straight away. In fact, even today, university graduates refer to themselves as unemployed teachers, would you believe? Things have got a bit better, we have to admit this. However, are these teachers who have no real option but to go and teach in schools, satisfied with their lives? Is teaching what they envisaged when embarking on the path to become scientists? No doubt, some do feel the satisfaction one gets from teaching. If, however, teaching was not their priority and it was a choice of necessity, life becomes miserable for these teachers because teaching, as we all know, is not an easy profession. Furthermore, one may feel for the students too, who will not get the best tuition, and teachers who may hate what they are doing. University graduates undoubtedly do various jobs while on the long waiting list for employment. Some work in private schools or institutions, private institutions, giving private lessons. Some even embark on illegal private lessons at their home. It's illegal in Cyprus to give private lessons. Many work in other fields. Once when I was teaching at the Pedagogical Institute, I had a student of 57. He was working at a bank and his turn came up to become a teacher. And he duly accepted the appointment and the opportunity to become a teacher, even when he only had 3 years left since the pension status at that time started at 60. I advised this guy not to come to schools and stay in the bank, but he wouldn't listen to it. Many university graduates do not even return back to Cyprus. They stay abroad and follow their dreams in countries that offer diverse opportunities for further studies, research, employment. My son is like that. More opt for this path now. Our world has become smaller and one is never far away from home, no matter where one is, her or his base. The current pandemic has given more impetus to biological sciences. This is a fact. Even more students want to pursue studies in biology. Our science has become very attractive, and this is extremely good, of course. Sadly, even more qualified biologists will be looking for employment abroad since home cannot provide for their needs. Is there anything that can be done? We need to be clear, I think, when we lay the options in front of would-be university students. This is mostly the job of school counselors. Students must be furnished with all information and be allowed to make informed choices. I felt quite sad one day when I bumped into a dear old student of mine. She pointed rather accusingly her finger at me and said, "It's because of you I went to study biology." She was unemployed at the time and living off her parents. As I said in the beginning, some of our people work in medical laboratories. There are some issues there. We have members who work in these clinical laboratories. They may be clinical laboratory directors, or they may be clinical laboratory scientists. What do? They perform examinations. They take samples such as blood, pharyngeal, vaginal, urethral, using a variety of methods, microbiological, biochemical, molecular biological, immunological, and so forth, to collect and provide information about the prevention, diagnosis, and follow-up of disease. But still, we have issues, which include competition from unlicensed laboratories, for example, pharmacies operating COVID labs. We hope to resolve this with the end of the pandemic. Even competition we have from medical doctors who try to argue, that laboratories headed by a medical doctor have an advantage because the doctor can also perform diagnosis, let's say, of a disease. Certain samplings, they argue, are a medical act, even in cases in which European and international guidelines state the opposite. Example of cervicovaginal samplings, colposcopy by colposcopy trained scientists. The doctors want to do everything. So let me focus on another issue now. Some issues facing the secondary education in Cyprus. The educational system of Cyprus faces various issues that need to be addressed, as it has not seriously adapted. The educational system of Cyprus has not seriously adapted to a changing world. Although many make this important inference, suggestions for effective treatments are not always easy to come. Let's look at the results of an education system that has been in place since 1960. We see inability of school units to respond immediately to the challenges of times, either at the material or technical level or at the level of updating the curriculum. We note dogged persistence in outdated teaching methods, such as the teacher-centered method, which in fact has been strengthened in recent years, despite the leaps and bounds of technology that has given great tools to teachers. We have ineffective school administration with directives moving vertically from the Ministry of Education to the schools. We create, it seems, students who feel their presence at school is more of a bore than of help to them. Most students eventually go to private tuition, which is an expensive practice, inflicting great damage to their parent finances in their endeavor to gain a place in colleges and universities at home or abroad. It's a very competitive field. Their appreciation for their private tutors is infinitely greater than any appreciation they have for their teachers at school. It is impressive that many students do not even know the names of their school teachers. Perhaps the most tragic result lies in the quality of young people coming out of this outdated system. Indicative is the absence of critical thinking and the inability to deal with ethical dilemmas, as well as the inability to apply what they have learned to innovative situations. They also seem unable to analyze situations and compose opinions and suggestions. They take for granted that what is proposed to them is valid, as they have never learned to question and challenge views that come from higher authorities. These are just a few points that I have raised. It's not an exhaustive list, but we think these can give the impetus to start an effort to understand the problems that are, of course, a necessary condition for their proper treatment. Let me very quickly go through some suggestions. We believe that the centralized way in which the Ministry of Education operates and exercises its power must be terminated as soon as possible. Schools, we firmly believe, should be autonomous. The administration of each school unit will have the main responsibility for the smooth and proper running of the school and not the Ministry of Education. An independent body needs to be established that will exercise serious control over school units and which will provide suggestions for their improvement. The teaching staff at each school unit should be employed by the school administration itself with minimum involvement of the Ministry of Education. In this way, the best teachers will be hired and performance will increase greatly, as a result of which costly private lessons will become unnecessary. In addition, every school by itself should be able to modify to some extent the syllabus, the curriculum, and teaching hours for each course, depending on the needs of the students, of each student, and the specifics of the school. In the final year of Lyceum, only the elective subjects of each student should be taught. Let me give you an example. In the final year, when people are studying frantically to gain access to universities, let's say they study for 3 subjects, biology, mathematics, chemistry, or physics, they still have to do history, they still have to do extra lessons in Greek, they still have to do religious instructions. So there is no time left to teach biology, let's say. In fact, every week, these students are taught biology only in 4 periods, 45 periods each. The emphasis must be on cultivating critical thinking. This will happen when the priorities change and we move from the base of the pyramid, which is knowledge, to the top where evaluation is situated, without skipping the intermediate stages, of course. Encyclopedic knowledge is no longer considered as a great qualification. What is required is the understanding and application of knowledge. Going to higher levels, mainly in high school, students should be able to easily identify the various components of ideas and proceed to the synthesis of new ideas. Eventually, students will be able to think critically and defend positions. Such young people with these qualities should be introduced to the society by the education system. I'm finishing now. As a follow-up to the latter, the way teachers ask questions, whether orally or in writing, should change drastically. Emphasis should be given on understanding mechanisms rather than on memorizing terms. This is of huge importance for natural sciences, where so many areas are still untapped and beg for answers to be provided. Knowledge-based questions should be significantly reduced, perhaps to 20% of the total. In the lower school, more emphasis should be given to questions of understanding and application, while in higher schools, the questions should include the areas of analysis, composition, and evaluation. So this new approach is bound to have huge benefits, not only for the pupils, but primarily they will affect society as a whole. A healthy educational system will produce free and democratic people that our country and all countries need desperately. In them, we could trust the country and be sure that any corruption and general decay we see today, yes, my friends, in this part of the world, we still have corruption, will be replaced by responsibility, legitimacy, joy, and faith in the future. We did have some successes. Charles Darwin felt very lonely in our country. His theory of evolution was not so popular even with the educators and the education establishment at large. This was clearly unacceptable for any scientific society. We have made strides on this one. As from 2018, the theory of evolution is taught in the proper context in public schools in Cyprus. This is excellent because, as you all know, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. On a personal, lastly, note, science and the cooperation of scientists allows us to dream of uniting Cypriots. You know, Cyprus is the last divided country in Europe, where all citizens will be equal and can reap the benefits of peace and prosperity. Thank you very, very much. That was all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikis. As far as I understand, all countries has some certain education problems and also unemployment for the biologists, and also some difficulties should be solved. So we same kind of problems found in Turkey also. So I appreciate your idea in the last sentences. Maybe division will be disappeared, and then the United Cyprus can be established. Since many years, we are waiting also like you, and then as a whole country. Thank you for very much again participation in our
Teşekkür ederim.
Activities. Mr. Attila, is there any question about the...
Chat'te yazdım hocam. Sana chat'te gelen soruları yazdım ama.
Okay, I am looking for that. And there is a question for the Mr. Han. From YouTube, he said, thanks for presentation. I have one question. I wonder, Biology Europe country pharmaceutical companies, and also he continued, I wonder biologists at the working Europe countries at pharmaceutical companies. I think the gentleman would like to how they can be worked at pharmaceutical companies, and biologists, these pharmaceutical companies accept the biology as a worker.
Yes, well, well, the answer is very simple, because I get lots of those requests, and it is make sure your education is right, and then start networking. And even especially today, networking is a lot easier, and try to get in those companies. The problem is because in the Netherlands we have a big dairy industry, which is doing milk products. And when we asked to the board of that industry, do you have any biologists? They said, no, we don't have any biologists. So then we gave them our readout of what they had. So they were not aware of it. And I think also it's once again the idiots at the table problem. Many people in pharmaceutical industries have no clue about what the biologist can do for them. So that is the problem. But the answer is, if you want to go into a pharmaceutical company, I've been there, it's nice work, you can enjoy yourself very much, but you have to just be self-aware, network yourself into it, because there's no easy way.
Okay, understand. Is there any question, Mr. Attila?
İhsan Hocam, Türkiye Biyologlar Derneği'nin 50. yaşında Avrupa Biyologlar Birliği toplantısını Türkiye'de yapalım.
Onu söyleyelim. 2025 yılında.
Evet, 2025.
Mr. Han, now you know that the Turkey Biologists Association is 47 years old. It has established in 1975. So our 50th years is coming in 2025.
Yeah.
So your Congress, European ECBA Congress, can be organized in Istanbul. We offer you this.
I have to think about it, but I have very fond memories of Istanbul. I can tell you that. It has been a very nice place in the past, and I really enjoyed the company of the people there. So yes, well, we'll have to look into that, but we can certainly progress on it. Yes.
Okay. Very nice. Thank you.
Var mı başka soru? Yok, gözüken yok hocam.
So there's no question now. So what can we do? We can say to thanks to all participants. Thanks you, Ham Schmidt. Thank you, Mikis Hajinopto and Mr. David. Thank you for your participation, your kind support for our common future facilities.
15.30'a kadar ara veriyoruz hocam. Bir de onu söylersen.
Now we are giving the break 15:30. Goodbye everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.